What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved actors walks onto a talk show set and ends up being escorted out before the segment even finishes? That's exactly what went down when Hugh Jackman sat across from Joy Behar on The View, and what started as a friendly conversation quickly spiraled into one of the most uncomfortable moments in daytime television history. Before we get into how this all unfolded, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us what you think about what happened here, because trust me, you're going to have opinions about this one. So let me set the scene for you. Hugh Jackman was scheduled to appear on The View to promote his latest project. The audience was buzzing with excitement. You know how it is when a major star comes on the show. The panel was ready, the cameras were rolling, and everything seemed normal. Jackman walked out to thunderous applause, flashing that signature smile of his, waving to the crowd. He took his seat, and the interview began with the usual pleasantries. Whoopi Goldberg kicked things off with some light questions about his career, his family, the typical softball stuff you'd expect. Jackman was charming as always, making the audience laugh, telling a funny story about his kids. Everything was going smoothly. Then Joy Behar jumped in. Now, if you watch The View regularly, you know Joy doesn't shy away from getting political or asking the tough questions. That's her thing. But what happened next caught everyone off guard, including Jackman himself. Joy leaned forward and said, "Hugh, I want to talk about something serious with you. You've been very vocal about certain social issues, and I respect that. But I've noticed you've been pretty quiet lately on some topics that a lot of people care about. Why is that?" You could see Jackman's expression shift slightly. He kept his composure, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. He responded, calmly saying, "Well, Joy, I think it's important to choose your moments. Not every platform is the right place for every conversation, and I try to be thoughtful about when and where I use my voice." Joy wasn't having it. She pressed further. "But Hugh, you have millions of followers. You have influence. Don't you think silence on certain issues is actually taking a stance? I mean, we're living in times where people expect celebrities to speak up." The audience got quiet. You could feel the tension starting to build. Jackman shifted in his seat, and his tone changed just a bit. He said, "I understand where you're coming from, Joy. But I also think there's a difference between being silent and being strategic. I care deeply about a lot of issues, but I don't think I need to broadcast every opinion I have to prove that I care." Joy shot back immediately. "Strategic or scared? Because it seems to me like a lot of celebrities claim they're being strategic when really they just don't want to risk their brand." Now, the other hosts started looking uncomfortable. Sunny Hostin tried to jump in to redirect the conversation, but Joy kept going. She said, "I'm just saying, Hugh, you've built this reputation as this nice guy, this family man, but when it really matters, where are you?" Jackman's jaw tightened. He took a breath and said, "Joy, I don't think that's fair. You don't know what I do privately. You don't know the conversations I have, the causes I support behind the scenes. Just because I'm not tweeting about everything doesn't mean I'm not engaged." But Joy wasn't backing down. She leaned in closer and said, "Behind the scenes doesn't help anyone, Hugh. People need to see their heroes stand up. They need to know you're on the right side of history." And that's when Jackman's tone really shifted. He said, "The right side of history according to who, Joy? According to you?" "I think that's pretty presumptuous." The audience gasped. You could hear it ripple through the studio. The other hosts exchanged glances. Whoopi tried to step in, saying, "Okay, let's take a breath here," but Joy cut her off. "Presumptuous?" Joy said, her voice rising. "I'm asking you to use your platform for good, and you're calling me presumptuous?" Jackman leaned forward now, matching her energy. He said, "No, I'm saying you're assuming that your definition of good is the only one that matters. I have my own moral compass, Joy. I don't need you or anyone else telling me how to navigate it." The studio went completely silent. This wasn't the Hugh Jackman anyone was expecting to see. This wasn't the charming, easygoing guy who sings and dances and makes everyone smile. This was someone who'd been pushed, and he was pushing back. Joy's face flushed. She said, "So you're saying you don't care about these issues?" "That's not what I said at all," Jackman fired back. "And frankly, Joy, I think you're twisting my words to fit whatever narrative you want to create here." Now Sarah Haynes tried to interject, attempting to cool things down, but the damage was already done. The conversation had crossed a line, and both Joy and Jackman knew it. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife, and everyone watching could feel that this interview was about to go completely off the rails. Joy sat back in her chair, but you could see she wasn't done. She looked directly at Jackman and said, "I'm not twisting anything, Hugh. I'm asking simple questions and you're getting defensive. That tells me everything I need to know." Jackman shook his head, clearly frustrated now. He said, "You know what, Joy? This is exactly what's wrong with these conversations. You ask a loaded question, and when someone doesn't give you the answer you want, you accuse them of being defensive or problematic or whatever label you want to slap on them." "Defensive?" Joy repeated, her voice sharp. "Hugh, you're sitting here telling me that you don't need to speak out publicly about important issues because you have a moral compass. What does that even mean?" "It means," Jackman said, his voice steady but intense, "that I don't perform my values for applause. I actually live them. And I don't think I should have to justify that to you or anyone else on national television." Whoopi tried again to redirect. She said, "Hugh, I think what Joy is trying to say is that people look up to you, and they want to see you lead by example." But Jackman wasn't looking at Whoopi. His eyes were locked on Joy. He said, "Leading by example doesn't always mean being the loudest voice in the room, Whoopi. Sometimes it means doing the work without needing credit for it." Joy let out a laugh, but it wasn't friendly. She said, "Oh, so you're doing the work?" "What work, Hugh? Enlighten us." Jackman's face hardened. He said, "I'm not going to sit here and list my charitable contributions or the organizations I support just to satisfy your need for validation, Joy. That's not why I do it." "So you won't tell us because it's private," Joy said. "But you want us to just trust that you're doing something? That's convenient." The audience was completely silent now. You could feel everyone holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Sunny Hostin jumped in, trying to find middle ground. She said, "I think we can all agree that there are different ways to make an impact, and maybe we should respect that people have different approaches." Joy turned to Sunny with an incredulous look. She said, "Sunny, come on. We're not talking about different approaches. We're talking about someone who has the privilege and platform to make real change and chooses to stay quiet." Jackman's voice rose for the first time. He said, "I am not staying quiet, Joy. Just because I'm not performing activism on social media doesn't mean I'm not doing anything. And quite honestly, I find it insulting that you're sitting here questioning my character based on your perception of what I should be doing." "Your character?" Joy shot back. "Hugh, I'm questioning your priorities." "There's a difference." "No," Jackman said firmly, "you're questioning my character. You're implying that because I don't meet your standards of public activism, I'm somehow morally deficient." "That's exactly what you're doing." Joy leaned forward again, her voice getting louder. She said, "If the shoe fits, Hugh, if you're not willing to use your voice when it matters, then yes, I'm questioning where you stand." Jackman stood up slightly in his seat, then caught himself and sat back down. His voice was controlled, but you could hear the anger underneath. He said, "Where I stand. Joy, you don't know me. You don't know what I've been through, what I've fought for, what I believe in. You've decided in your mind who I am based on a 5-minute conversation, and that's incredibly arrogant." "Arrogant?" Joy's voice went up another notch. "I'm arrogant for expecting someone with your platform to actually use it?" "Yes," Jackman said without hesitation. "You are, because you're assuming that your way is the only way, and anyone who doesn't follow your playbook is somehow less than." The other hosts were visibly uncomfortable now. Sarah tried to speak, but nothing came out. Alyssa Farah Griffin attempted to change the subject entirely, saying, "Maybe we should talk about the project Hugh is here to promote." But both Joy and Jackman ignored her completely. Joy said, "You know what I think, Hugh? I think you're comfortable I think you've made your money. You've got your career. And now you don't want to rock the boat. You don't want to risk losing fans or endorsements. So you stay neutral and call it being strategic. Jackman's eyes flashed. He said, "You have no idea what you're talking about. You sit here in your safe studio with your safe audience, and you throw stones at people who don't perform the way you want them to. That's not activism, Joy. That's judgment." "Safe studio?" Joy said, her voice incredulous. "Hugh, I've been speaking my mind for decades. I've taken heat from all sides. Don't you dare tell me I'm safe." "Then maybe you should understand," Jackman said, his voice cutting, "that not everyone wants to operate the way you do. Maybe some of us believe that real change happens in conversations, in communities, in places where cameras aren't rolling." Joy shook her head. She said, "That's a cop-out, and you know it. That's what people say when they don't want to take a real stand." "A cop-out?" Jackman repeated, and now his voice was rising to match hers. "Joy, I've spent years working with organizations that help people. I've donated millions. I've used my influence in ways that actually matter, not just posting online to make myself feel better." "Then why won't you talk about it?" Joy demanded. "Because it's not about me," Jackman said forcefully. "It's about the work. It's about the people being helped. I don't need to turn it into a publicity stunt." "So anyone who speaks publicly is doing a publicity stunt?" Joy fired back. "Is that what you're saying?" "That's not what I said," Jackman responded, his frustration evident. "But you're twisting my words again, which seems to be your specialty." The insult hung in the air. Whoopi's eyes went wide. The audience let out a collective gasp. Joy's face went red. Joy stared at Jackman for a long moment, and you could see her processing what he'd just said. Her voice dropped to a dangerously calm tone. She said, "My specialty? Hugh, let me tell you something. I've been doing this for a very long time. I ask tough questions. That's my job, and if you can't handle that, maybe you shouldn't be sitting in that chair." Jackman didn't back down. He said, "Asking tough questions is one thing, Joy. Ambushing someone and then acting like you have the moral high ground is something else entirely. You brought me here under the pretense of a normal interview and turned it into an interrogation." "An interrogation?" Joy said, her voice rising again. "I asked you about using your platform. That's not an ambush, that's journalism." "No," Jackman said, shaking his head. "Journalism is asking questions and listening to the answers. What you're doing is asking questions and then attacking me when my answers don't fit your agenda." "My agenda?" Joy's voice was getting louder now. "My agenda is accountability, Hugh. My agenda is making sure people with power actually do something with it. And who made you the arbiter of what doing something looks like?" Jackman shot back. "Who gave you the authority to decide who's doing enough and who isn't?" Whoopi finally raised her voice. She said, "Okay, we need to take a breath here. Both of you. This is getting out of hand." But neither Joy nor Jackman were listening. Joy pointed at Jackman and said, "You know what your problem is? You can't handle being challenged. You're so used to everyone loving you, so used to being the good guy, that the second someone asks you a real question, you fall apart." Jackman's voice went cold. He said, "I'm not falling apart, Joy. I'm responding to your accusations. There's a difference. And frankly, I think this says more about you than it does about me." "About me?" Joy said, her voice sharp. "What exactly does this say about me, Hugh?" "It says," Jackman continued, his tone measured but cutting, "that you're more interested in creating conflict than having a real conversation. You want to score points with your audience by taking down someone they admire. That's not brave, Joy. That's opportunistic." The studio went dead silent. The other hosts looked shocked. Joy's mouth opened slightly, but for a moment no words came out. Then she found her voice. She said, "How dare you? How dare you sit there and accuse me of being opportunistic when you won't even answer a simple question about where you stand?" "I did answer your question," Jackman said, his voice firm. "Multiple times. You just didn't like my answer. So you kept pushing and pushing until you could paint me as the bad guy." "You're painting yourself as the bad guy," Joy countered. "All you had to do was say you care about these issues and that you're working on them. Instead, you got defensive and started attacking me." "Because you weren't asking in good faith," Jackman said, leaning forward now. "You were baiting me. You wanted this exact reaction so you could turn this into a moment. Well, congratulations, Joy. You got your moment. Sarah Haynes tried desperately to intervene. She said maybe we can all just take a step back and remember we're all on the same side here. Are we, though? Joy said, not taking her eyes off Jackman. Because I'm starting to wonder whose side Hugh is really on. That was the breaking point. Jackman stood up. He said, "That's enough. I'm not going to sit here and let you question my integrity, because I won't perform for you. This interview is over. Sit down, Hugh," Whoopi said, her voice firm but not unkind. "Let's talk this through." "No," Jackman said, his voice resolute. "I came here in good faith. I came here to have a conversation. But this isn't a conversation. This is an attack. And I don't have to sit here and take it." Joy stood up too. She said, "You're walking out? Really? You can't handle a little pushback, so you're just going to leave?" "This isn't pushback," Jackman said, his voice rising. "This is you trying to humiliate me on national television because I won't bend to your will. I've been respectful. I've tried to explain my perspective, but you're not interested in hearing it. You're interested in tearing me down." "I'm interested in the truth," Joy said loudly. "And the truth is you're running away because you can't defend your silence." "I'm not running," Jackman said, his face flushed now. "I'm refusing to participate in whatever this is." "There's a difference." Whoopi stood up now, trying to position herself between them. She said, "Hugh, please, let's just take a commercial break and we can sort this out." "There's nothing to sort out," Jackman said, looking at Whoopi with an apologetic expression. "I have nothing but respect for you, Whoopi, and for the rest of the panel. But I will not be spoken to this way. I won't be ambushed and then called a coward for not playing along." "Nobody called you a coward," Joy said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "You didn't have to say the word," Jackman replied. "You've been implying it this entire time. And I'm done." He started to remove his microphone. The audience was in shock, some people gasping, others whispering to each other. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every second of this unraveling situation. Joy said, "This is unbelievable. You're really going to walk off this set like a child throwing a tantrum?" Jackman stopped and turned back to her. His voice was quiet now, but there was an edge to it that was almost more intense than when he was yelling. He said, "Joy, I've tried to have this conversation with you like an adult. I've explained my position. I've been patient. But you keep pushing and insulting and twisting everything I say. So yes, I'm leaving. Not because I'm a child, but because I have enough self-respect to know when a conversation has become toxic." "Toxic?" Joy said incredulously. "Oh, so now I'm toxic?" "This situation is toxic," Jackman clarified, "and I'm removing myself from it." A producer's voice could be heard off camera saying something urgent, but it was too late. Security personnel were making their way onto the set, though it wasn't entirely clear if they were there to escort Jackman out or to simply manage the situation. Whoopi stepped forward, putting her hand up to the security personnel. She said, "Hold on, just hold on. Nobody needs to escort anyone anywhere. Let's all just calm down and figure this out." But Jackman was already unhooking his microphone pack from his belt. He handed it to a nearby stagehand and said, "I appreciate the opportunity to be here, but I think it's best if I go." Joy crossed her arms. She said, "Of course you're leaving. That's what people do when they can't defend themselves. They run." Jackman turned to face her one more time. His voice was tired now, the anger giving way to something else, maybe disappointment. He said, "Joy, I hope one day you realize that not everyone who disagrees with you is your enemy. I hope you realize that there's more than one way to make a difference in this world. But right now, you're so convinced that your way is the only way that you can't even see how destructive this kind of conversation is." "Destructive?" Joy said, shaking her head. "Hugh, the only thing destructive here is your refusal to take a stand." "I have taken a stand," Jackman said quietly, "just not the one you wanted me to take. And that's the real issue here, isn't it? You can't control me, so you're trying to shame me." "Nobody's trying to control you," Sonny Hostin interjected, trying to find some middle ground. "I think Joy is just passionate about these issues, and sometimes passion comes across as aggression." Jackman looked at Sonny and said, "I understand passion. I respect passion. But what happened here today wasn't passion. It was a setup, and I should have seen it coming." A setup? Whoopi said, sounding genuinely confused. Hugh, nobody set you up. We ask tough questions of everyone who sits in that chair. Not like this, Jackman said, shaking his head. Not with this level of hostility. Whoopi, you know me. You've known me for years. Have I ever given you any reason to think I'm not a good person? Have I ever done anything that would make you question my values? Whoopi's expression softened. She said, no, Hugh, you haven't, and that's why I'm asking you to stay. Let's talk this through. But Joy interrupted. She said, being a good person isn't enough anymore, Hugh. The world is on fire and people like you have the power to help put it out. But you'd rather stay comfortable. Jackman looked at her with something close to pity. He said, you really believe that, don't you? You really think that unless someone is performing their activism the way you want them to, they're not doing anything at all. That's incredibly narrow-minded, Joy. Narrow-minded? Joy's voice went up again. I'm narrow-minded for expecting accountability? You're narrow-minded for thinking accountability only looks one way, Jackman replied. You're narrow-minded for assuming that silence equals complicity. You're narrow-minded for judging people based on your limited view of who they are and what they do. Joy took a step forward and one of the producers moved closer, clearly worried about how this was escalating. She said, my view isn't limited, Hugh. I see things very clearly. And what I see is someone who talks a big game about having values, but won't actually demonstrate what those values are. Jackman let out a frustrated laugh. He said, I've spent the last 20 minutes trying to demonstrate my values by having a respectful conversation with someone who clearly doesn't respect me. I've remained calm while being accused of every moral failing you could think of. I've explained my position over and over again, but none of that matters to you because I won't give you the soundbite you want. This isn't about a soundbite, Joy insisted. Then what is it about? Jackman asked, his voice rising again. Because from where I'm standing, it seems like it's about you needing to prove something. You need to prove that you can take down Hugh Jackman. You need to prove that even the nice guys have something to hide. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, Joy, but I don't have some dark secret. I'm just a person trying to do my best, and apparently that's not good enough for you. The other hosts were silent now, watching this unfold like spectators at a car crash. The audience was completely still, hanging on every word. Joy said, her voice sharp, if your best includes staying silent on critical issues, then no, it's not good enough. And there it is, Jackman said, nodding slowly. That's what this was always going to come down to. No matter what I said, no matter how I explained myself, you were always going to find me lacking. Because that's what you do, Joy. You tear people down and then act surprised when they don't want to sit there and take it. I hold people accountable, Joy corrected. No, Jackman said firmly. You bully people into submission and call it accountability. And I'm not going to be bullied. Not by you, not by anyone. The security personnel were getting antsy now, clearly waiting for direction on what to do. One of the producers stepped fully onto the set and said quietly to Whoopi, we need to make a decision here. Whoopi looked torn. She turned to Jackman and said, Hugh, I'm asking you one more time. Please stay. We can figure this out. Jackman's expression softened when he looked at Whoopi, but he shook his head. He said, I can't, Whoopi. I came here to have a conversation, but that's not what this is. And I won't compromise my dignity to give this show a viral moment. Joy scoffed. She said, your dignity? Please. You lost that the moment you started deflecting. And you lost any credibility the moment you turned an interview into an attack. Jackman responded. We're done here, Joy. We're done. He turned to walk off the set and the producer spoke to the security personnel, gesturing toward Jackman. The security guards moved to flank him, not aggressively but clearly there to escort him out. Jackman didn't resist. He walked calmly toward the exit, the cameras following his every move. Joy called after him. Running away doesn't make you right, Hugh. Jackman stopped at the edge of the set and turned back one final time. He said, and attacking me doesn't make you right either, Joy. Maybe we both need to think about that. Then he walked off, the security guards following behind him. The studio was in chaos. The audience was buzzing with conversation. The hosts were looking at each other in disbelief. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of the aftermath. Whoopi finally turned to the camera and said, "We're going to take a break. We'll be right back." But everyone watching knew they wouldn't be right back. Not really. Something had broken during that interview. Something that couldn't be fixed with a commercial break and some damage control. Hugh Jackman had walked onto The View as one of Hollywood's most beloved figures, and he'd walked off as the man who stood up to Joy Behar and refused to back down. The footage spread across the internet within minutes. Social media exploded with reactions. Some people praised Jackman for standing his ground. Others criticized him for walking out. Some blamed Joy for being too aggressive. Others defended her right to ask tough questions. Everyone had an opinion, and everyone was talking about it. But here's what really matters. Two people with different perspectives on how to create change in the world came together for what should have been a conversation. And instead, it became a battle. Neither one was willing to see the other's point of view. Neither one was willing to give an inch. And in the end, nothing was accomplished except creating more division. So that's what happened when Hugh Jackman appeared on The View. That's how a routine interview turned into one of the most talked about moments in daytime television. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and drop a comment below answering this question. Do you think Hugh Jackman was right to walk off the set? Or should he have stayed and continued the conversation? Let me know what you think.